Hello, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Johanna. And I see E. Allen. I'm not sure the first name, so I won't make one up because I could do that. Hello, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Johanna. Uh-oh, hold on. And I see E. Allen. We're live on Facebook. Oh, that's Eunice. Duh. Hi, Eunice. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for today's Executive Roundtable. My guests today are April Goudy. Wave, April.
Hello.
And Marti Murphy. And for those that don't know, I'm Dr. Nadia Brown. And today we're going to chat about relationships and business.
Woohoo.
So if you thought being in a relationship was interesting, try starting a business and being in a relationship. And so both of my guests today also happen to be married. So we'll definitely get an opportunity to get the married woman's perspective. And in future conversations, we'll have a nice mix up. So before we dive too deep, I just want to give both my panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. So we'll go in alphabetical order. That means we'll start with April.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Nadia. So I am April Goudy. I am the founder of the Cultivator Company, and we are a strategic marketing partner for small businesses. So we help you get started with your email marketing, your content strategy, your overall marketing strategy. So that's who I am, and I'm honored to be here today.
We are so glad you're here today. And up next is Marti, who actually had a chance to hang out with her and her husband this weekend. So I already know. So, but Marti, tell us a little bit about you.
My name is Marti Murphy. I'm an emotional fitness coach, certified EFT practitioner, which is tapping. If anybody doesn't know about that, I host a EFT radio show called From Ranting to Raving, and I help people clear their conflicts in their business and their life so they can create what they want.
Wow, just really, really good stuff. And so we're going to dive right in. Ladies, let's first begin by having you share a little bit about your story. So just a little bit about your transition story from your corporate job to your business. And then kind of let us know on that continuum where your spouse showed up. So you might have been married before you took the leap, or you took the leap after he showed up in the picture. So whoever wants to go first.
I guess I'll start. So I started my business in 2013. And funny enough, Dr. Nadia was my business coach back then. Yay. So she helped me get started. And at the time I was single. And so I was a single parent actually. And so I started my business because I wanted security for me and my daughter, and I wanted to make sure that we had a good foundation. And so when I met my husband, I actually wasn't in full-time business. I was still working for a large marketing organization here in Arizona. And so he knew I wanted to start a business, but I was working part-time, and we thought, oh, this will be years off. And so 2015 rolled around. We got married in February, and I said, well, probably in 3 years I'll go full time. Well, 11 months later, I got laid off.
Oh, about that.
Right. And not only did I get laid off, but I was the primary breadwinner of our family. So that was a huge, huge leap for us. And at that time, then he decided that I would go into full-time business. And so that's how I ended up where I am now. I've been in full-time business for almost 2 years, but that was my transition, was working for a corporation, making lots and lots of money, to being laid off and saying, hey, we're just going to leap out here and do this. And so far, so good.
I love it. It's funny, something I was thinking about before we joined today was before Toby and I got married, I never thought I was going to be the entrepreneur. This is always the funniest thing. My vision was that I would support Toby in his entrepreneurial endeavors. Because when we were dating, he was always looking at different business opportunities. And I was like, you know what, babe, I got your back. I'll find a great job. It'll be awesome. And yeah, so what had happened was, so 5 years later, he's the one with the job. I'm the entrepreneur. So talking about some things with the relationship. So yeah, Thanks, April, for that. And we're going to come back because I'm sure you have some follow-up stories.
Oh, do I?
With that transition. What about you, Marti? What was it like when you made that leap from corporate into your business?
Well, I'd been in corporate America for 30 years, and I didn't quite realize about myself till my sister actually brought this to my attention. I had always been on the search for a business to do. I always had some entrepreneurial spirit in me, but I would have never claimed it. Interestingly, even after being an entrepreneur, my sister's like, oh yeah, I was telling my friend about you. And I'm like, oh my God, I guess that's right. I had always, even though I was doing a corporate job, looking for something else because I just somehow, some way knew there had to be more. And I think I desired more. So my business was born out of a major financial debacle that my husband and I went through where investments went really south, as a lot of people can attest to, in 2008. And literally, I'm 55, and I just want to, for a frame of reference, I'm the youngest of four girls. My father was born in 1921, and my mother was born in 1925. They were of the generation that a woman, what she does doesn't really quite matter so much. She's meant to have babies and all that. And there was always a big part of me that resisted that, although I do have a daughter who I love and adore. But I didn't think, there was a lot of ways I was putting limits on myself. So when we had this financial debacle, I realized I had been relying on my husband, even though I always worked. I really always thought, okay, he's really primary, this and that. And it was like a wake-up call for me to go, I got to figure something out for myself. So I found EFT because of my own stuckness, and I didn't even think about doing it as a business. And I thought, oh my God, I'm getting great results. If I could help people that felt as stuck as I did, then I want to do it. And it's turned into a business. So I left this October. It will be 3 years that I left corporate. So I was moonlighting, yes, to grow my business while I was still in corporate. And at one point I was like, oh my God, I have 2 full-time jobs.
Yep.
And then it became time, as you know, April, to go, and Nadia, became time to go, it's time to take the leap.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Marti, when you took that leap, because yours was, I guess, all of us in some ways had a little help, a little encouragement that wasn't of our own doing and making that transition. What was it like? What was your thought process like when you just said, you know what, I'm going to start this business, even though it's birthed out of something that's a little scary or even painful because of the financial debacle?
Yeah, well, the way it kind of happened, building my business happened pretty organically initially, and that was great. And because my husband and I, we had actually had a business before, just for about 1.5 years, and we did really well with it. And so I had at least I had the experience of, okay, sometimes you don't get paid, like that kind of thing. Oh, wow, this week we didn't get a paycheck. So I had a little bit of that, but honestly, I am so security oriented. My husband's more the type, I'll dive off the high dive and then check if there's water in the pool, and I'm checking the temperature. I want to be sure that it's high enough. So like you, Nadia, it's kind of ironic that I'm the one that's really sort of made this bigger entrepreneurially at this stage of the game. And my husband still continues to work at that. But it was still scary. It was still, even though I was moonlighting and moving myself in that direction, when I finally said bye-bye to the regular paycheck, I actually gave my company 4 months notice, knowing that they might let me go right away. But I will tell you, I think it was the best thing I did, because that 4 months, as soon as I gave my notice, the terror started hitting me like, oh my God, like in 4 months, I'm not going to get a paycheck. The beauty is that 4 months allowed me the security of a paycheck while I was working through my emotions. So by the time the day came that I was gone, I realized, I was like, wow, I've actually kind of worked through a lot of my terror. Yeah. As you both, I'm sure, know, it's still a work in progress.
Oh yeah, it doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop, right? But I think you just get more proficient at, oh, it's up here again. So, now I know it's the thing I've got to work on. So
true.
Yeah.
What about you, April? So you newlywed, less than a year in, right? Breadwinner, and surprise, goodbye job. So what was that like in determining that you wouldn't, especially making the decision as a newlywed, as a primary breadwinner at that point in your marriage, to say, you know what, instead of me doing what most people would say to do, and that's go find another job as quickly as possible, I'm going to go over here and try this entrepreneur thing, which, like Marti said, I'm not sure when I'm going to get paid. Like, what was that process like in those conversations with your spouse?
Well, so interestingly enough, we were not only newlyweds, I was not only the primary breadwinner, but 45 days before I got laid off, we had just closed on a brand new home. Which was, mind you, 2 times the amount of the home we had the year before.
Oh boy.
So
it just gets better and better.
It got better and better. So for me, it was kind of interesting. I've always been the one in my family that I would say was different. My family was very structured. You go to college, you get a job, you work it for the rest of your life, you retire, you have a pension, and you die. That's the life you're supposed to have. Right. And I never fit into that mold when it came to my family. Now, my husband is what I like to call a lifer. He can work the same job every day, doing the same thing for the rest of his life, and he will be a happy camper. That does not fit me. So I knew that at some point I was going to kind of make that leap into business. And so when I got laid off, I had already had this exit strategy in place. It was supposed to be for 9 months after that. But at least I had a strategy. I had a few clients. And so for me, I think I believed in myself enough at that time. I had people around me who believed in business and small business, so that I walked out of there feeling like I can do this. And through a lot of prayer, I realized that, yeah, I can do this, as scary as it is. And at the time, I was 38. And I had this big goal of, I'm going to be a full-time business owner by the time I'm 40. That's what I'm going to do. And at 38, I kind of had this thought of like, it's now or never. Either I'm going to go find another job and I'm going to get stuck in the rut and the paycheck and the commute and all these different things, or I'm going to take this leap and we're going to make it happen. And so financially, it was utterly terrifying, but I went back to what I knew, and initially I had gotten a part-time job to help supplement where I didn't have clients. I made a plan and I just worked that plan. So there were ups, there were downs, there were scary days, there were days I cried, there were days I felt like we have this. But ultimately, I think I believed in myself enough, my husband believed in me, and I had a circle of friends that believed in me enough to say, you're going to get through this. So,
oh my gosh. Yes, that circle is key. People ask me like the key to success in business. I'm like, find a coach or a mentor.
Yes.
Your team are crazy. Those friends that are crazy enough to believe that you can actually make this happen.
Yes.
Tell me more, April, about what your husband had to say about all of this. Because we're hearing your side of the story, but I know, because I have a husband and he loves and he supports me. But his idea of a good time is not being homeless. So, tell me more about what those conversations were like, especially in those early days.
So I remember the day I got laid off, and I called my husband and I said, hey, we're getting laid off. And he goes, huh? How do you know that? And I said, well, like me and, every other person around me kind of got this email. I can't get into my laptop. We're getting laid off.
Oh, yeah.
And so I called him on the way home and I said, yep. So I got laid off. He goes, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I think I'll just work business. I'm actually pretty happy. And he goes, I'm sorry, you're happy? And I said, yeah, I think it's time to just take this leap. And he's like, okay, we'll talk about when we get home. So all the way home, I've got this plan, right? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to put this in place. And so we get home, we talk about it, and I tell him my plan. And he says, okay, well, how are we going to pay our mortgage in 3 months? So number one, thank God we did have some savings. And I said, well, I don't know.
Not sure. I thought that far ahead, honey.
No clue how we're going to pay our mortgage in 3 months. And so over the first few weeks, he would come home and he would say things like, have you looked for a job? And I go, no. Are you going to look for a job? No. And he'd just walk away. Like he'd completely walk away. And so this went on for about 2 weeks, and I still was laying out my plan, right? I've got this part-time job and I've got this client. And so after about a month though, he came to me and he said, you know what? I see how passionate you are. I see how excited you are. He said, what can I do to help you? And at that time, my husband actually went and got 2 part-time jobs.
Wow.
On top of his day job, to ensure that we could pay the mortgage in 3 months. But over that course of the first, I would say still 6 months, there would be comments that he'd make. I would say things like, babe, you know, this year my revenue goal is XYZ. And he'd go, well, it takes business owners 5 years to get there. And I'm like, that's who? Like, who says that's the norm? And so we did have those moments of, I didn't feel like he didn't believe in me, but I don't think he understood the system, right? Like I said, his security was you go to college, you get a job, you work there forever, and then you retire. And in his mind, business ownership, those that succeeded were Silicon Valley. You start an app, you make $1 million in the first month. If you don't, you're going to go out of business. And because that didn't happen, we would have those conversations. And so it took probably 6 months or so for him to actually see that this was a serious business and not a hobby that was going to bring in money here and there. And so after he kind of caught hold of it, he jumped on board, but we still have those conversations. Right now we're talking about our debt reduction plan. How are we going to get out of debt making what we make today? And, you know, those comments come up of, you know, if you had a job and you think to yourself, you have to get a clue because we're not going back that route. But we still have those moments where it's like, you know, you were making XYZ 3 years ago and life was different. And so we have to constantly have those conversations, but I think he's definitely on board now.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, the comments don't stop. Trust me. What about you, Marti? Because, you know, you guys went through this financial debacle. So you already know, like, it's already stressful in and of itself. And then you decide that in the midst of all of this, even with 4 months notice, I'm going to say goodbye to my, you know, to the stable income that we can sort of kind of maybe rely on. Like, what were those conversations like?
Yeah, well, it's been interesting. My path, because my husband has definitely always been quite a bit more the risk taker than me, which is really interesting. So it's been surprising, you know, in so many ways that I'm the one that's actually taken this path, and he is still working a job. He does other things too. But the one time that I would say I got resistance from my husband right out of the gate was when I told him I wanted to fly to New York. I still had a corporate job at the time, but I was going to go to, but if you guys knew the debt that we had, for me to spend $10,000 to go study with someone in New York was like, what do you have, 3 heads? But it was amazing. And I remember telling him that, and that was the one time I would say I got resistance from him where he was like, oh, it's just one more of those things. And I remember, I think because I'd been doing the process I have tapping, because Nadia, my husband, he's a force to be reckoned with. And I looked at him and I said, I totally get what you're saying. I'm doing it anyway. Wow. That's huge for me to be able to do it. And what I did it standing in my confidence about that, not because I used to do that where I would say I'd had false confidence and then, but I'd crumble because I wasn't really solid in it. And to be met with that force and go, I understand what you're saying, but I'm doing it anyway. And how it's worked out, and realistically how that investment is so much more than paid for itself. So that was probably my first primary. And then after that, it was interesting how he would say, hey, you know, maybe you could tap with me or teach me about that. And I would say he's all, as long as the ship stays afloat, he's always like, okay, I do feel pretty fortunate in that way. He doesn't come down on me a lot. He doesn't ask me a lot because I take care of all the bills and pay everything. And he's like, hey, as long as the ship's afloat, you know, it's okay. You know, if the ship started to sink, then he might say more. Occasionally, you know, as you guys know, you're married couples, they have arguments. And every now and then, you know, when those barbs are thrown at each other, it's, you know, it's like, well, you're not quite so successful yet. And, you know, then I go, okay, well, I just got to tap on that. Me off. and then I get through it. But I would say it is always, like you ladies know, it's always a work in progress, and you're always sort of renegotiating, and there's times you're floating along and it's fine, and other times you're like, oh, okay, well, we've hit a blip in the road.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That is super cool. Yeah, my husband, as you know, those ups and downs, and you said that magic word, investment, Marty. So we're going to come back to that one, because there are times as entrepreneurs, we have to invest in our businesses, and sometimes you invest before you necessarily have the investment. And, you know, when do you make those decisions? How do you make those decisions, especially as a woman, you know, and you're married to a man, and there are all these societal norms and ways you're supposed to have these conversations and ways it's supposed to look. And like you said, Marty, it can get kind of hairy. And if your husband has a different temperament, oh, those conversations can get really hairy. And so, you know, even making this $10,000 investment, and I did get to meet Liam, so I know that personality. What was it like? Like, I know you're on the other side of it now, but leading up to you taking your flight to New York and all of that, like, what did that look like?
Well, what's interesting is I literally would consider myself more of like a fear monger. Like, I have let fear rule my life, a lot of my life, and that's why you know, when I found the tapping, it's been really helpful to me, and I see how it's shifted me and changed me. So when I feel that fear, that was really fascinating though, because when I talked to this is my first mentor, and I was talking to her about working with her, and she told me what the investment was. Bizarrely, I was like, wow, she's only that much? Like, that's actually what went through my head. And I think because I was in such a place for the first time in my life, because I had released so much of this fear and resistance and programming that I had, that actually at that time in my life, I didn't waver. I rarely ever found myself going, oh crap, how are we going to pay for this? The funny thing is, I'm going to use this word magically, it just seemed like the money kept showing up to do it. That was my first thing. Since then, you know, I've made many more investments with other coaches, and it's always seemed to work out. But there's certainly times since then where I'm like, ooh, there's the fear. Okay, I'm happy that I have a tool that when I feel those thoughts, I can really move through it. But I do remember my husband said to me, well, if this fails, it's on you. And I'm like, yep, it is. That's how I knew I had changed internally, because in that time, I wasn't afraid of it. In the past, I literally would have been, give me a binky and a pacifier, and I'm going to sit in the corner and I'm going to suck my thumb and be like, oh God, I hope I can make it. I still have those binky moments.
I think we all do.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, April. Yeah. I just think it's better.
Yeah.
I love it. Before we jump over to you, April, just wanted to let any of our guests know that you can type questions in the chat box if you want to ask a panelist a question, or just chime in, because I'm raising both of my hands. I can totally relate to having to overcome fear, especially making an investment. 10,000 what? 10,000 pennies? Like, are you sure you meant dollars? Is there another currency we're talking about here? And it can be really scary, especially as you're building. It's one difference, you know, it's one thing to make a $10,000 or $20,000 investment when you're already grossing $7 million. Like, that's a completely different conversation when you're still at that point of, yeah, about this whole revenue cash flow thing. So what about you, April, as you've been on this journey and making investments or doing different things, and you have that conversation with your spouse and he looks at you, like Marty said, like you just grown another head. Like, how does that work?
So my two biggest investments actually came earlier this year, and they were not even close to $10,000. But you would have thought they were $10 million to my husband. So the first investment that I made was about $500, and it was to purchase some content that I needed to service some of my clients. And so the fear in me was obviously like, you know, okay, should I spend this money or should I keep this money? What should I do with this money? But the way I thought about it going into 2017 was that I have to act like a grown-up CEO, right? My brother-in-law few years ago, he would always ask, how's your hobby going? How's your hobby going? It's not a hobby. This is my life.
He has some nerve.
Exactly. And so sometimes we tend to think about it in that way of a hobby. And so I had listened to, I believe, an entrepreneurship podcast by Dave Ramsey, Entre Leadership, and they were talking about your mindset, right? And so I had to, and I've been in corporate long enough to be associated and work with CEOs and C-suites to understand how you have to think at a certain level. And so this year I made up my mind that I was going to think and act like a grown-up CEO. And so part of that was making those hard investments. And so I invested into some content in March. And the first thing my husband asked was, well, when are we going to see that money come back?
Oh boy. Magic 8 ball.
Right. You know, this is not the stock market of, you know, I'm going to invest 500 and tomorrow we'll get, 5,000 back. And so having to just explain to him that these investments will pay off over time, that was something that he didn't quite wrap his mind around. It was, we put money in, I want to see you with 25 new clients next week. And so that was a hurdle. The second thing that I did was I invested in people. I had gotten to the point in my business where I was just overwhelmed with kind of those small tasks that we tend to do, right, that eat up our time. And so being a solopreneur, you would think to yourself, I don't need people. I'll just stay up later. I'll just work more hours. I'll just get it done. But once again, I had to ask myself, what would a grown-up CEO do? They would get help. And so I invested in someone to help me to do some of my administrative tasks and also to do some of my the tasks of my clients, because that way I could focus on those items that were going to bring in new clients or those higher dollar tasks I need to be working on. And so that was kind of a scary leap, because now I'm thinking like, okay, not only am I got to take care of my revenue, but now I've kind of contracted with this person and I've got to make sure they're taken care of every month as well. Right. And it wasn't a huge investment, but it was money.
Right. It doesn't matter. It's like, even if it's $100, you're like,
exactly.
That's an extra $100 when I'm still trying to
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so when we had that discussion, once again, he just didn't realize, well, aren't you as an entrepreneur just supposed to not sleep? Huh? No.
Wait, what?
If you want food, if you want the house taken care of, if you want our child taken care of, if you want our finances balanced, I need to be sane, which means I need sleep.
If you don't want to sleep in a cold bed by yourself at night.
Exactly. And so initially that was a hurdle, because he felt like unless we were making a certain amount of money or we've got this office suite or this space, what do we need people for?
Oh, yeah.
And so I had to once again put on my grown-up CEO hat and say, okay, I've got to make this investment. And both of them have paid off tremendously. But those are decisions that you think you'll have to make 10 years into your business, not 2. But yeah, they've definitely paid off. But he was really kind of lost on why do we even need this? And so now he's seeing the results of it. But that was a hard conversation of spending that money.
Oh, yeah. I think people investments are huge, but, and it's one thing I see working with clients that it takes us sometimes, especially as women, a while to figure out that, this big vision I have, I can't build this by myself. Unless, like you said, I want to be a member of Team No Sleep, Team No Nothing, because my business is now ruling my life. And especially having a spouse, they want to do stuff. And it's like, dude, I'm tired because I'm wearing all the hats in my business. And so I love it that you were like, you know what, wait a minute. I can't wait till 12 years out to get some support. I need some support now. And I had that same conversation when I first hired someone to support me in my business, April. My husband was looking at me like, wait, what? And the investment, y'all, was $140 a month. Like, I remember that number because it wasn't astronomical. I didn't go out and hire somebody with a $70,000 salary. It was $140 per month. And we had a very similar conversation like, why can't you just do that yourself? Yep. Like, because that's not the highest and best use of the limited time that Nadia has. Like, I really had to learn early on, like, you know what? I'm going to need to get somebody to do some of these other things because my time is better spent here, and to really start to learn how to let go and delegate. And not that I'm really that good at it, but I realized that I needed to at least try.
Right, exactly.
What about you, Marty? Any challenges with delegation in your business?
My husband calls me Puss in Boots on Shrek, like, I'll handle this. I mean, it is, I definitely have to work on my receiving help myself. I do have a web guy, and I've switched, but he does a lot of stuff for me, which is great. And in a lot of ways, he is somewhat of a VA. I have a bookkeeper that I pay $140 some odd a month. Could I do it myself? I don't want to. And I love that I just turn everything over to her. I literally, as you know, Nadia, I just signed up to start working with a new business coach who I've made a 2-year commitment to that I'm actually quite excited to work with. And April, you're so ahead of me, and Nadia, you are too. She's very insistent. You're going to get help. You're going to hire an admin. And I listened to one of the gals that work with her, and she's like, yeah, I was like, no, I don't need that. I don't need to spend that money. And as you guys have pointed out, and you, April, like, they do the stuff where your time is better spent someplace else. And I am really looking forward to that. I'm sure I'll have to tap on because a couple of the people I heard were like, oh, I can't afford that. And I really am seeing like you can't afford not to.
Yep.
And I do want to add this. It's interesting that I've signed on for 2 years with this business coach because I have also coached for someone else. And that is shifting now. And fortunately, my own business has created more for me, but that is definitely going to be a shift for me financially. So it's interesting that here I am again with things have slowed down in that way because of that. And I'm making this bigger investment. But I even was having a conversation with someone just before this where I literally was like, oh, and I'm going to use the word universe, God, whatever. I was like, oh, wow, I actually feel like I'm really being supported in making this transition, even though I can't see the visible, manifestation of it yet. But I have this this trust that, wow, this is going to work out. Like I'm seeing how things are working out to support me. So I just wanted to share that because I think there's you have to have a lot of freaking trust.
A lot.
Yes.
And that's not always been my forte.
Right. Oh, no, because, control freak, anyone?
Oh, not at all.
Never have any issues in that area of my life. None.
Never.
One of the questions for all of us were, Anne-Marie asked, what tasks were some of the first that you delegated or outsourced? So, April, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So some of the first tasks that I delegated was things like scheduling my social content. So one of the things as a marketer I believe in is getting your content out there and being consistent with it. So it was scheduling my content. And then also I had a few clients where that was a service that I was providing for them, was scheduling their content. But as we all know, that scheduling content takes time. And so I just looked at, that was one of the starting things. Other things that I realized once she came aboard that I needed that I didn't think about. So for example, I work with a lot of graphics, a lot of images. And what I was doing was dropping these images into like this folder, right? And so one of her tasks was just going in and organizing the folder. Well, that saves me so much time now when I need an image to type in like a word and the images come up, right? So it was things like that that you think to yourself, oh, there's no way I can, have enough for this person to do. You'll find things that you've been meaning to get to that will make your life easier. So that was one. One that I've heard very common is like a bookkeeper or someone who's going to organize your invoicing and those type of things, writing things for you, organizing your calendar. Those are things that most people, I believe, start with that you just don't realize is sucking up so much of your time. So that's where I started. And now she not only does administrative tools for me or tasks for me, but there's a couple of clients that now she fully handles their social posting, some of the research for them. Eventually, I think we'll move into some of the writing for them. And it's just amazing about how much time I was spending that I didn't realize on those simple tasks.
Oh my gosh, yes. For me, one of the things was, one of my first was helping with the images that go on your blog post. Because I was terrified, and I hadn't invested yet in like one of those like stock images services yet. Yep. So, but I was terrified of using the wrong images and being sued. Like, I'd heard enough to know, like, you just can't go grab some random image and post it on your blog. So, but like you said, I was fine writing the content, writing my newsletter, but good Lord, I spent so much time formatting it and finding the part, because it could just be any stock image. Like, I needed to look at all million of them that they had on the page. So I quickly learned, like, Nadia, seriously, it's important, but that's not generating revenue. So that was one of the first things I hired someone to support me in, was to find images that I wouldn't go to jail for or be sued for, and to, do my newsletter and get all of that stuff set up. And then, like Johanna said, so Johanna shared, she said, I hired us a wife, an amazing lady who comes in 2 times a week to help with meal prep, light cleaning. Now the fridge has soups plus dinner set to go, worth every penny. Yes. And awesome. One of my first people was also someone to help clean up. And so I was like, wait a minute. The toilets do need to be cleaned, but do I have to be the one to clean them? And I remember sitting in my office working, and there was someone cleaning my house. It was so amazing. And my husband's face when he came home from work, it was worth every penny. I wish I would have recorded that, because it was awesome. And so, again, sometimes it's not always in your business, which is important, but what about your house? If you have small children, do you need a nanny or a babysitter, someone to just, handle that while you handle business? And so a lot of times as women, we put on our capes and we just start trying to do everything. And before you know it, you're just like team overworked, as Cherie said, and team frustrated. What about you, Marti? I know you mentioned a couple people that you had on your team, but anyone else that you recommended or would, as you consider, especially in the beginning of bringing on or outsourcing?
Yeah, like I said, right out of the gate, the first web guy I hired, he was also did a lot of admin stuff for me, which was super helpful. I know people that build their own website. I was like, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't even want to clog my head with that. That was huge for me. And then, the bookkeeping, that was another thing. I don't want to even deal with that. Those 2 things. And it's funny, I did hire my daughter a couple times to do just some like admin stuff for me at various times. And it is interesting that we're having this conversation, because this is that next level for me to actually get a VA, virtual assistant, to start taking care of this. This is actually sort of an automated assistance. I have acuity scheduling. This is how little of a control freak I am. I would not let go of my calendar forever. My husband was like, Marti, first of all, and not to like slam anybody as a daytimer, I was the daytimer gal. He's like, Marti, get like in the 21st century, there's like online like calendars. Guys, I was literally like fingers down the wall. Like, I can't do that yet. I mean, I gotta see it. And when I started the radio show, that producer was like, oh, you need to get on Google Calendar. And I love that. And then literally it took me a couple of years to move into acuity scheduling. And April, you made the point, I could not believe how much time I was spending emailing back and forth. Does that time work? Does that not? And I was so terrified to let go, the controller in me, of my schedule. I'm literally like, why did I wait so long? If somebody, they can go on my website, schedule a session, or I just send them the link. And it figures out the time change, everything. That scheduling thing has been huge for me, how much time it's saved.
Oh my gosh. I love that you mentioned that, Marti, because one of the things I posted in the chat was that sometimes delegation isn't necessarily a person. It could be a system. And you are so right. I went through the same thing. A lot of times you meet someone, you want to connect, there's all this back and forth. And, I used TimeTrade for years, and it was so easy to create a link and send it out, whether it was for clients or people you met. I have one for virtual coffees. Like, it has been a game changer, because you're right. You're back and forth. And then I live in Arizona. Half the time we are one time zone, and another time it's just like, seriously, Nadia, get your life. Like, is that 10 o'clock Eastern? No, wait a minute. 7 a.m.? I might still want to sleep in. Like, no, I don't want to meet you that early in the morning. So, again, having that, and it also helps with boundaries.
Oh, my gosh.
The system only operates within the boundaries, whereas sometimes we might be willing, well, I was scheduled to go to the gym, but since you, so I love that. That is so good.
Nadia, I want to Can I piggyback off of what Marty was saying about delegation?
Yes.
One of the things that I employed in my delegation strategy was my husband. When we got married, you know, a lot of our friends were under this impression that because I have a business, my husband now has a business. We don't operate that way. But how he helps me in my business is by helping to take care of our daughter, and helping to do things around the home, and helping to make my life easier so that I can focus on business. I was so stuck on, you know, I have to make sure dinner's still done. I have to make sure laundry's still done. I have to make sure all these things are still done because they're just not going to be done right. Well, here's the thing. I have a 9-year-old daughter. You know, if I don't make dinner, they're not going to die. You know, he figures it out, she figures it out. And so I remember when he came to me and said, how can I help you? And I think he was so afraid that I would put him to work in my business. And I said, no, I don't need you to work in the business. I need you to help to alleviate some of the other things that are taking up my time. But honestly, that was hard for me to do because we're so ingrained to do it that we have to step out of that comfort zone and say, you know what? If towels don't get folded the way I fold them, who cares? You know? And so I just want to touch on delegation within your home is such a huge thing.
Huge. Yeah.
And letting it go, you know, like letting it go. Let's touch on this really quickly, because sometimes we're allowing other people or society or whoever they are, right, to tell us how things should run in our household. So I know, like, me, first of all, Toby and I don't have any children, so there's already a lot of judgment around what Nadia could and could not do since I don't have babies, right?
Right.
And then, you know, with that, I remember I was raised in the South. I'm a good old-fashioned Southern girl, you know, grits and all, right? And so, wait a minute, who do you think you are to have somebody else coming in your house, right? Another woman to clean your house, and there's all kinds of judgment and ideology around that. And then, you know, what are those barriers, like you said, what are things that Toby can do that might not be so masculine or whatever society says it should look like versus, you know, me, and he does have a job. It's not like he isn't working, but I'm working too. And how do you have those conversations? So I think it's like you said, it's important to have those conversations to really set some expectations, some parameters around, look, mister, you want to see a return on this investment, right? Sometimes I have to bring it back, like, hold up. We just made this investment. There are things that I need to do. But on the flip side, I also had to have boundaries for myself because there was a season where I was out of balance. So it's all about the business, all about growing the business, all about revenue. And my poor husband was just like, there's a woman in my house in the office somewhere. Like, I see her every now and then. She'll pop out and say hi. So even with that, there are set end times for my work day. Like, I really had to start in some ways treating it like the 9 to 5. Like, I wouldn't work all night at my 9 to 5. Like, I'd be like, I gotta go home. Why, you know, so why do I do it now that it's in my business? So I think it works both ways. So great point, April.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cherie said, teach everyone how to cook or hire her. Marion said, yes, let it go. Do what works and aligns with your goal. I love it. Love it. Love it. All right. So we have less than 15 minutes before we wrap up. So I just want to give each of you an opportunity to share maybe one of your biggest lessons thus far on your journey.
I'll go. Mine is really depending on whatever, like, my spirituality is very much about that I'm supported. And I don't always believe that. But what I find is the biggest lesson for me, because having been in corporate forever, you know, there's a corporate model. It's work, hard, struggle, you know, you gotta effort. I literally have had, and I continue to have to detox off of that. And how I mean is, like, I always use this example. One day I have the radio show and I have a due date. And so it was due the next day and I had to record it, upload it, edit it. And of course I had it scheduled on my schedule that I was going to do it. And I finished this session with a client and I literally was like, I don't want to do it. And I knew I had to do it. And I had this little voice go out and go for a mountain bike ride. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Like it's 1:30 in the afternoon. I can't go do that. And I was like, it kept gnawing at me. But I had zero inspiration to do the radio show. So I was like, I'm going to go with it. That was terrifying for me because it's like work hours and this and that. And I went out, I rode for about an hour. I literally felt like a little kid. I was exhilarated and fascinating. The idea came to me for what to do on the radio show because I unplugged from the pushing energy, I got to make it happen. And I came home, I recorded, edited, and uploaded the radio show in 45 minutes out of pure joy and inspiration. And that is my biggest lesson, having been in corporate so long, is when I find myself in the pushing energy, and I call it pushing, like I'm the one that's got to make it happen, I realize I am not trusting that there is a power greater than myself that is there to support me. And that's funny. I felt a little emotion come up with that. I am practicing this more and more and more. When I get the fear, when I get that, to go, there's power that is greater than me, that is supporting me, guiding me, directing me, helping me. And when I tune into that, it is amazing how the fear leaves and inspiration for my business comes. And then I'm not struggling. I'm not pushing. Because I personally think we've been sold a bill of goods that that's how it's supposed to be for us. We got to struggle and effort and work hard, and it's very yang and masculine energy. And I'm like, no, like when you follow the inspiration, it comes and it goes so much better. And that is, I constantly reboot myself on that. I constantly remind myself, Marty, it's not all up to you. That's like my biggest aha.
I love it. We can do a whole round table on that in and of itself, Marty. That is so true. Mm-hmm. What about you, April? What's your biggest lesson?
My biggest lesson is simply to find your new normal. So like you, Marty, I was corporate. You have to be at work at this time. You take your lunch, you go home at this time, you're done. And so when I launched into full-time business, one of the benefits is, guess what? I can make my own schedule. But what would happen was I would get up in the morning, and my normal life before corporate was that I would pray or meditate or work out and these type of things. And if I decided to do that at a different time or a different part of the day, I would feel guilty, right? Like I should be at my desk working right now.
Oh, yeah.
And I had, like you, Marty, I had to let that go and figure out what my new normal was. And so some days my normal is I'll stop at 3 o'clock and cook dinner, or I will get up in the morning and work out, and I'll go grocery shopping and start my day at 9. It's whatever keeps me in balance and allows me to do both successfully. So it's not, I have rigorous hours. If I don't feel guilty anymore about going to watch my daughter's school play, because in my mind, everyone else is at work, right? And so I would encourage anyone out there who is, launching a business, in business, find the normal that works for you and works for your family. And so, yes, there may be days where I am, have writer's block, and I'll go do laundry for a half hour. And then it's like, oh, this is it. So just find your new normal. And like you said, Marty, take that time for yourself. My first year, I didn't do that. It literally was business, business, business. I don't have time to work out because I have to write this. I don't have time to pray because I have to write this. I don't have time to do all those things. But taking away that time from myself was killing my business, because I was no good in business. I was no good as a wife, and I was no good as a mother. And so now on my calendar, I protect those certain times during the day and during the week so that I can balance myself out so that I can be the best me that I can be.
Oh, yeah, that's so good. Mm-hmm. I echo what April just said. It is funny how one of the things that helps me, especially with that, is I travel a lot. So there is some built in, a lot of juicy ideas come at 30,000 feet on a plane. And so I would tease myself and say, you know what, it's just because I'm closer to God, but I think a big piece is that because what else am I going to do? I can't go anywhere. I always get a window seat. So I like crammed, yeah. So what else? So you just sit and you listen, but it's also, it forces you to, hear. But again, that downtime is so important because all those ideas and that inspiration. And Marti, you, again, someone did agree with you. So we are going to add that to a future roundtable to talk about detoxing from that. I got to push to make everything happen in my business. And there are times when we do need to push and take action. So we're not saying just totally chill in your seat and put your feet up on your desk and it's just going to magically appear. But there is a balance. And that is so, so very important. All right. So before we wrap up, because you two are amazing and you're brilliant at what you do, and I would be selfish if I just kept all the juicy yumminess to myself. So please, please, please share with everyone how they can get in touch with you. I'm sure they want to continue further conversations, or better yet, just hire you to help them now that we know we need somebody on our team. I'm just saying. All right. So we'll start with you, Marti.
Best way to get in touch with me is my website's my name, Marti with an I, M-A-R-T-I, Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y.com. And you can schedule, literally, I have a complimentary, and like most of us do, get to know you session. I am not high pressure at all. I'm really big into finding win-wins. And if I don't, if we talk and it doesn't feel like a fit, I totally have people I can refer you to. And really, I'm definitely more I would call myself the mindset person, because that's been the biggest thing for me. So, and then there's all kinds of free resources where you can get to know me better on my website, instead of oh, I don't even want to talk to her yet because I don't know. So I just want to make it easy for people, because I like that when people do that for me, when they're not pressuring or anything like that. That's the best way. So thanks, Nadia.
You're welcome. Thank you. And what about you, April?
Awesome. So I can be reached at CultivatorCo.com. So our company is the Cultivator Company, or April at CultivatorCo.com. Like Marti, I've got a free consultation you can sign up for on the website. We'll talk a few minutes about where you're at, where you're trying to go. Once again, won't be pushy. If I'm not a good fit for you, I'll definitely try to reach out to my network and see where I can help you or get you some assistance. So yeah, feel free to reach out for me, connect with me on Facebook, CultivatorCo, and yeah, I'll be happy to talk to you and see where you're at. So thanks again, Nadia.
I love it, love it, love it. So as we conclude today, just one final minute, one final nugget that you want to share with the ladies who joined us today. We'll start with you, April.
So I would say, just ladies, in your relationships, I would say be mindful of the other person. Relationships are hard as is, but when it comes to business, particularly if you have a partner or a spouse that is not entrepreneur minded, take it slow with them and try to see it from their perspective, and then let them know how they can support you. I think the worst thing we can do is be quiet about the help that we need. And if there's something they can do to support you, let them know so that they know where they can help you out.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is good. And you, Marti?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if there's men and women on here, but especially as women, because I just think we're taught, I heard Warren Buffett say, wait till women figure out that they're the slaves of the world, which is that we all do these things that we're taught, this is my job as the woman of the house. I'm supposed to do it. April, you talked about that so perfectly, where your husband helps with the laundry, and my husband does that too, and shifting those roles as women and allowing ourselves to stand in the forefront. And I would say it this way, in some ways, I want to use this word not in a bad way, to be selfish about your time. And April, I love that you schedule that on your calendar, to schedule that time for yourself and use that time to nurture yourself. I have been doing so much more of that on my own, and I cannot tell you how it shifts and has changed the way I'm getting more in tune with, oh, there's a power greater than me. I'm not on my own. I am supported. And I would tell you that spills into my relationship with my husband. So, yeah.
I love it. Well, I just want to thank you. I echo what Marian said. She was great sharing, and thank you both for being so transparent. Because sometimes, especially, we get on here and we put on our mask and it's oh, my marriage is perfect and everything's great in my business, and we never argue about the fact that I left my job. Yeah. Okay. So again, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for connecting. And all of you, thank you for joining us today, and stay tuned for future roundtables where we will have real conversations with real women. All right, have an amazing day, you all, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.